We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Shadows in Paradise. Dominic Nick Caldwell stood on his expansive beachfront deck, watching the California sunset cast golden reflections across the Pacific. At 35, he had built his security consulting firm from scratch into a powerhouse that protected the digital assets of half the Fortune 500. The breeze carried the scent of salt and success, yet something felt off-kilter in his perfect world. His wife Alexis moved around their Malibu home with increasing detachment. 6 years of marriage had transformed from passionate connection to calculated distance. Nick's instincts, the same ones that had saved him from poverty and made him rich, were screaming warnings. Working late again, he asked as Alexis grabbed her keys. Her blonde hair was styled immaculately, her makeup subtle yet flawless, excessive for the charity board meeting she claimed to attend. The fundraiser planning won't finish itself, she replied, not meeting his eyes. Don't wait up. As her Porsche disappeared down the winding coastal road, Nick returned to his home office and unlocked a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside lay a small tracking device and printouts from a private investigator. For 3 months, he'd been gathering evidence, each discovery cutting deeper than the last. The Caldwells had come from nothing. Nick had grown up in a Rust Belt town with parents who believed in hard work and little else. When he showed technological aptitude, they'd sacrificed everything for his education. Their modest savings, second mortgages, extra jobs, all invested in their only son's future. Alexis had been there for the last stage of his climb, the daughter of a wealthy family who'd never known struggle. Her parents had disapproved initially, wanting someone from their social circle, but Nick's rapid success had silenced their objections. Now, watching the tracking dot on his phone move not toward the charity headquarters, but toward a boutique hotel in Santa Monica, Nick felt a coldness settle in his chest. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and opened his laptop. The message from his investigator contained hotel surveillance photos. His wife entering the elevator with neurosurgeon Benjamin Westcott, son of the West Coast hospital magnate Preston Westcott, and Alexis's college sweetheart before she'd met Nick. Betrayal from Alexis hurt. Betrayal involving Ben Westcott was something else entirely. Nick set down his glass and made a call. Sky, I need everything on the Westcotts. All of it. Financials, personal dirt, offshore accounts. Whatever you can find. Sky Romano had been his first hire, a brilliant hacker he'd recruited directly from a federal prison work release program. Her loyalty was absolute after Nick had given her a second chance when no one else would. Boss, are we talking corporate espionage or personal? Her voice held concern. She knew about his suspicions. Both. I'm accelerating the timeline. Nick stared at the photos. And Sky pulled together the contingency package. All of it. That's serious? Deadly. Nick closed his laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. His reflection stared back. Successful, powerful, betrayed. He'd built his life through strategic thinking and unyielding determination. Those who mistook his quiet demeanor for weakness never saw the ruthlessness coming until too late. As darkness fell across the ocean, Nick made another call to his parents back in Ohio. Mom, about Christmas. There's been a change of plans. Chapter 2. Verification. The Westcott family had everything Nick lacked. Generations of wealth, social connections, and the kind of old money prestige that couldn't be bought. What they didn't have was his intelligence or his hunger. For the next week, Nick became a ghost in his own life. He attended business meetings, smiled at dinner parties, and slept beside Alexis while gathering evidence with methodical precision. Each night after she fell asleep, he sat in his study reviewing surveillance footage, bank statements, and hotel receipts. The affair had lasted 11 months, starting shortly after Ben Westcott returned from a Doctors Without Borders stint in Africa, conveniently divorced, and practicing at the same hospital where Alexis volunteered. The pieces are coming together, Sky reported during their secure call. The Westcott's finances are messier than they appear. Preston Westcott's liquidity issues are significant. Several of their medical centers are underwater, and they've been selling properties quietly. And the charity angle? Your hunch was right. The foundation Alexis works with has received major donations from Westcott Holdings. Perfect cover for their meetings. Nick absorbed the information silently. The betrayal went beyond the physical affair. Alexis had been sharing details about his business, security vulnerabilities, client lists, expansion plans. His wife was betraying not just their marriage, but trying to undermine the empire he'd built. The why became clear when Nick discovered correspondence between Preston Westcott and Alexis. The elder Westcott had never accepted his son's brief marriage to a nobody like Alexis Turner. Now, with Ben divorced and the Westcott medical empire needing an infusion of technology expertise and capital, they saw an opportunity. Get Alexis back for Ben, gain access to Nick's business acumen and assets, then discard him. For the Westcotts, it was about maintaining dynasty. For Alexis, it was returning to the social circle she'd never fully left. When the final piece fell into place, documents showing Alexis had consulted divorce attorneys specializing in aggressive asset seizure, Nick knew it was time to act. On a rainy Tuesday, he followed Alexis to the Beverly Hills Hotel. The exclusive bungalows offered privacy for the wealthy, but wealth couldn't overcome Nick's determination. He paid a hotel employee handsomely for access to the adjoining suite and set up recording equipment. Through the wall, he heard everything. Their laughter, their passion, their plans. Once the divorce is finalized, we'll have enough leverage to force him to sell, Alexis said. Your father's contacts will make sure the judge is sympathetic. Dad's already lined up partners to acquire his security firm once we devalue it, Ben replied. Nick won't know what hit him until it's too late. Christmas at his parents' will be our last appearance as a couple, Alexis continued. I'll play the devoted wife one final time. Those simple people always love me more than him anyway. Nick felt something harden inside him, not just his heart, but his resolve. The Westcotts had underestimated him. Alexis had forgotten who he was at his core, someone who had clawed his way up from nothing and would never allow himself to be pushed back down. He gathered his equipment and left the hotel, rain mixing with the single tear that escaped before he banished emotion entirely. By the time he reached his car, Nick Caldwell had reconstructed himself into something new, something without mercy. He called his lawyer, then his financial advisor, then Sky. Execute the containment protocols, he instructed. All of them. Are you sure, boss? Sky asked. There's no coming back from this. I'm not the one who needs to worry about coming back, Nick replied, watching Alexis's car pull out of the hotel driveway. Make the arrangements. And Sky, send the first set of files to my father. Chapter 3. Christmas Revelation. The Caldwell family home in Ohio remained unchanged, a modest two-story colonial with faded blue shutters and carefully maintained gardens. Nick's parents had refused his offers to buy them a more luxurious place, preferring to stay where they'd raised their son and built their lives. Nick arrived 2 days before Alexis, citing business meetings. Those days were spent in quiet conversations with his parents, showing them evidence of his wife's betrayal and the Westcott scheme. Richard and Martha Caldwell listened in stunned silence, their initial disbelief giving way to protective anger. They had welcomed Alexis into their family, treated her like a daughter, defended her when relatives questioned her commitment to their son. I need you to follow my lead, Nick explained, outlining his plan. It has to happen exactly this way. Martha wiped tears from her eyes. Are you certain there's no other way? Mom, they're not just trying to end my marriage. They want to destroy everything I've built, everything we sacrificed for. Nick held his mother's hands. Do you trust me? With everything, she answered, straightening her shoulders. The stage was set when Alexis arrived on Christmas Eve, playing the role of devoted wife perfectly. She embraced Nick's parents warmly, distributed expensive gifts, and recounted charitable works with practiced humility. Only Nick could see the calculation behind her smiles, the slight checking of her watch when she thought no one was looking. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and the scent of Martha's cinnamon rolls. The family gathered around the modestly decorated tree, exchanging gifts with careful ceremony. Nick watched Alexis open her presents with feigned delight while texting surreptitiously, undoubtedly updating Ben Westcott on her progress. After the main gift exchange, Martha disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a small box wrapped in silver paper. "Alexis, dear," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Richard and I have one more special gift for you." Martha handed Alexis the box. Inside lay a single key attached to a keychain shaped like a house. "We bought her a house for starting a new life," Martha announced, her voice carrying unusual weight. "You'll understand someday, Nick." Confusion flickered across Alexis's face before she masked it with gratitude. "That's incredibly generous. I don't know what to say." "It's what you deserve," Richard added pointedly. Alexis glanced at Nick, clearly trying to assess whether this unexpected gift might derail her plans. He remained expressionless, taking a deliberate sip of coffee. "I have one more gift," Nick announced, reaching under the tree for a small envelope. "For Dad." Richard opened it carefully, removing a single piece of paper. As he read, the color drained from his face. "Is this real?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Nick nodded. "Every word." Alexis shifted uncomfortably. "What is it?" "Evidence," Richard replied coldly, passing the paper to Martha, whose expression hardened as she read. "Of what you and the Westcotts have been planning." The confusion on Alexis's face transformed to shock, then fear. "I don't know what you're talking about." Nick finally turned to face his wife fully. "The key isn't to a house, Alexis. It's to a safe deposit box containing copies of everything. The hotel recordings, your meetings with divorce attorneys, the conversations with Preston Westcott about dismantling my company. You were investigating me?" Her voice rose with indignation that quickly withered under the collective Caldwell glare. "The key represents a choice," Nick continued calmly. "Walk away now with what you came into this marriage with, or fight me and lose everything, including your freedom. Corporate espionage carries significant penalties." Alexis's composure cracked. "You can't prove anything." Martha stood, suddenly seeming taller than her petite frame. "We've heard the recordings, dear, including your comments about us. These simple people who supposedly loved you more than our own son. The Westcotts miscalculated," Nick said, standing as well. "They thought my parents were sentimental fools who would pressure me to reconcile. They didn't realize that in this family, loyalty means everything." As the full implications dawned on Alexis, her face contorted with rage. "You think you've won? Ben's family has connections you can't imagine. They'll destroy you." Nick's smile was devoid of warmth. "Actually, I've just begun. While we've been opening presents, the SEC and FBI have been serving warrants to the Westcott Medical Group based on evidence of Medicare fraud and tax evasion I uncovered during my investigation of you." The blood drained from Alexis's face as she fumbled for her phone. The screen showed dozens of missed calls. "Your boyfriend's family empire is collapsing as we speak," Nick continued. "The house key is symbolic, Alexis. It represents the life you chose, one built on lies. What happens next depends entirely on you." Rising shakily, Alexis grabbed her coat. "This isn't over, Nick." "For us, it is," he replied. "Divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow. Sign them, disappear from my life, and you might salvage something. Fight me, and I'll make sure you and the Westcotts regret every moment of your betrayal." When the door slammed behind her, Martha placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Nick watched through the window as Alexis's car skidded down the snowy driveway. "I will be." What he didn't say was that the Christmas confrontation was merely the opening move in a game the Westcotts didn't yet realize they were playing. Alexis had been a pawn, important but ultimately sacrificial. The real targets were still enjoying their holiday champagne, unaware that their world was already burning. Chapter 4. Opening Salvos. The first strike against the Westcotts made national news 3 days after Christmas. Federal agents raided Westcott Memorial Hospital in Los Angeles, carting away servers and financial records while reporters captured Preston Westcott's stunned expression as he was escorted to a waiting car. Not in handcuffs, but clearly shaken. Nick watched the coverage from his Malibu home, Sky beside him monitoring social media reaction. They're calling it a routine compliance investigation, she reported. Westcott's people are spinning hard, claiming it's a misunderstanding. What about Benjamin? No public statement yet. He canceled all surgeries for the week, citing personal reasons. Nick nodded, satisfied with the initial chaos. The evidence he'd provided to authorities through anonymous channels was damning, but largely circumstantial. Enough for search warrants and uncomfortable questions, but not necessarily prosecutions. The legal action was a distraction, designed to destabilize while he implemented his real strategy. Their stock is already down 12%, Sky added. Just on the uncertainty, the buzzing of Nick's phone interrupted their discussion. The caller ID showed Alexis's attorney, a predictably aggressive litigator from a top Beverly Hills firm. Mr. Caldwell, my client rejects your proposed settlement terms. We'll be filing for an equitable division of all marital assets, including your company holdings. Nick's laugh was genuine. Tell your client to check her prenuptial agreement. Prenuptials can be invalidated under certain conditions, such as infidelity with documented corporate espionage. Interesting strategy, Nick replied. I look forward to discovery, where I'll be forced to submit all evidence of your client's activities to the court record. I'm sure the Westcotts will appreciate their personal communications becoming public while they're under federal investigation. The attorney's hesitation was audible. We should discuss this further. My terms are non-negotiable and expire in 48 hours. After that, I release everything. When the call ended, Sky raised an eyebrow. You think she'll fold? Alexis isn't the fighter she thinks she is, Nick replied. She wants luxury and status, not legal battles and public humiliation. The following day proved him right. Alexis signed the divorce agreement, relinquishing all claims to Nick's business and assets in exchange for a modest settlement that would maintain her lifestyle temporarily, long enough for her to secure another wealthy patron if the Westcotts abandoned her. But the Westcotts weren't going down quietly. That evening, Nick's primary banking partner called, voice tight with concern. Nick, I don't know what's happening, but Preston Westcott just withdrew his foundation's support from our annual charity gala and suggested other donors do the same if we continue our relationship with your firm. Similar calls followed, clients reporting pressure, partners expressing concerns about association. The Westcotts were leveraging their social capital against him, a predictable countermove. They're hitting your reputation, Sky observed, tracking the sudden appearance of negative reviews and vague accusations across business forums. Standard character assassination playbook. Nick remained unperturbed. Let them waste resources on traditional tactics. Execute Phase 2. Phase 2 began with a series of anonymous tips to financial journalists about the Westcott family's overextended investments and cash flow problems. Nick's team had identified 7 major Westcott properties with underwater mortgages and arranged for the loans to be quietly purchased by shell companies he controlled. Simultaneously, he made a single phone call to Preston Westcott's primary competitor in the hospital business, Riker Healthcare. Mr. Riker, how would you like exclusive access to the most advanced security system in healthcare, along with detailed intelligence on Westcott vulnerabilities? 2 days later, the announcement of a strategic partnership between Caldwell Security and Riker Healthcare sent shockwaves through the medical industry. The Westcotts, who had rejected Nick's previous overtures in favor of their plan to acquire his company post-divorce, now faced their largest competitor armed with his expertise. The counterattack intensified when Benjamin Westcott discovered he'd been removed from the staff rotation at his hospital following anonymous complaints about his conduct with female patients. Complaints Nick had carefully curated from legitimate grievances that had previously been suppressed by Westcott influence. That night, a furious Ben confronted Nick outside his office building. Security cameras captured the neurosurgeon shoving Nick against his car. You think you can destroy my family because my girlfriend got tired of you? Ben snarled, his perfect appearance disheveled by stress. Nick straightened his tie calmly. Dr. Westcott, I'd reconsider putting your hands on me when there are witnesses. You're destroying lives over wounded pride. No, Nick replied coldly. I'm responding proportionally to a coordinated attack. You and your father planned to strip me of everything I built. Alexis was just your entry point. Ben's expression flickered with surprise before hardening again. This isn't over. My family has survived worse than you. Has it? Nick stepped closer. Your father's generation built something from nothing. You inherited privilege without understanding its foundation. That's why you lose everything while I keep building. As security approached, Ben backed away. Watch your back, Caldwell. Not everything can be protected by your systems. Nick smiled. That sounded remarkably like a threat, Doctor. Perhaps I should add it to the file. When Ben stormed off, Nick's phone buzzed with a message from Sky. They just discovered the loans. Moving to Phase 3. Not yet, Nick replied. They need to feel truly desperate first. Chapter 5. Desperate Measures. The Westcott family's annual charity gala had been a cornerstone of Los Angeles high society for decades. This year, however, Preston Westcott found himself making uncomfortable calls to longtime supporters, explaining the scaled-back event. Just temporary cash flow issues, he assured them, his once commanding voice now carrying an edge of strain. These federal inquiries are baseless distractions. What Preston couldn't explain was why 4 major hospitals in his network had suddenly experienced catastrophic IT failures, why key physicians were receiving better offers from competitors, or why banks were suddenly calling in loans that had previously been extended with handshakes. Nick observed the disintegration from a calculated distance, his own company thriving with new partnerships and innovations. When Riker Healthcare announced plans to acquire 3 struggling Westcott facilities, industry analysts cited systematic mismanagement as the cause of the Westcott decline. What no one outside Nick's inner circle understood was how deliberately orchestrated each setback had been. They're selling their Aspen property, Sky reported during their weekly update. Below market value, cash sale. Nick nodded. And Benjamin? His privileges have been suspended at 2 more hospitals pending reviews. The medical board is now involved. The pressure was building exactly as planned, forcing the Westcotts toward increasingly desperate countermeasures. When Nick's home security system detected an intrusion attempt, he wasn't surprised, merely disappointed by the amateurish approach. The real blow came when Preston Westcott arranged a meeting with Senator Howard Prescott, chair of the Cybersecurity Subcommittee and a longtime friend. 3 days later, Nick received notice that his company was under investigation for potential security violations related to government contracts. They're using regulatory harassment, Nick told his executive team, convened for an emergency meeting. Classic move when direct attacks fail. This could freeze our federal contracts, his CFO warned. The timing couldn't be worse with the Singapore expansion. Nick remained impassive. I anticipated this. We've maintained perfect compliance precisely because I expected someone would try this angle eventually. What he didn't share was that Senator Prescott's son had once approached Caldwell Security with a proposal to compromise client data for political leverage, an overture Nick had documented meticulously before rejecting. That insurance policy was about to become useful. Meanwhile, Alexis reemerged, her calculated silence broken by a tearful interview with a sympathetic journalist claiming emotional abuse and control throughout their marriage. The story painted Nick as a paranoid, ruthless businessman who had fabricated her affair to justify his cruelty. The Westcotts had finally discovered his one vulnerability, public perception. While Nick could fight financial and legal battles with cold precision, character assassination required a different approach. That evening, as negative headlines multiplied and clients called with concerns, Nick received an unexpected visitor at his home. Martha Caldwell stood on his doorstep, determination etched on her weathered face. "Mom, what are you doing in California?" She brushed past him, setting down her sensible luggage. "Did you think I'd let that woman drag your name through the mud without a response?" Nick nearly smiled. "I can handle Alexis." "Not like a mother can," Martha replied, pulling a folder from her purse. "I brought every letter, every card, every gift she ever sent us, including the ones where she complained about you working too hard while asking for money for her charity projects. I've also brought her college roommate, Leslie, who's staying at a hotel nearby and has quite a different perspective on Alexis's character." Nick's momentary surprise gave way to appreciation for his mother's strategic thinking. "You've been planning this?" "Of course," Martha said briskly. "Your father and I didn't build our life by being passive when our family is threatened. Now, call that reporter who interviewed her." A mother's perspective makes compelling counter-narrative. Martha's interview, coupled with supporting documentation and testimony from Alexis's former friends, effectively neutralized the sympathy campaign. The narrative shifted from Nick as controlling husband to Nick as victim of opportunism, a storyline the business community found far more palatable. The Westcotts, increasingly desperate, escalated further. Benjamin confronted Nick at a medical technology conference, creating a scene that required security intervention. Preston attempted to leverage old connections to interfere with Caldwell Securities' international licensing. Most alarmingly, Nick's head of physical security intercepted a private investigator attempting to plant listening devices in his home office, a felony that traced back to a shell company with Westcott connections. "They're getting reckless," Sky observed. "Dangerous." "Good," Nick replied. Desperation leads to mistakes. The breaking point came when Preston Westcott, facing imminent financial collapse, attempted a last desperate gambit. He approached one of Nick's largest clients with evidence of supposed security vulnerabilities in Caldwell's systems, fabricated proof that personal data was being compromised. The client, following established security protocols, immediately alerted Nick. "They've crossed the final line," Nick told Sky after reviewing the falsified documents. Begin Phase 3. Chapter 6, Crossroads. 3 months after Christmas, Preston Westcott received a call from his bank. The remaining loans on his medical buildings, loans he thought were held by different financial institutions, had all been acquired by a single entity, Monarch Holdings. They're demanding immediate repayment of $87 million, his financial advisor explained, voice tight with stress. All of it, across all properties due in 15 days. That's impossible. These loans have years left on their terms. The terms include acceleration clauses in case of default on any single property, the advisor replied. And you missed payments on the Santa Barbara facility last month. Preston felt cold sweat forming at his temples. Negotiate an extension. Explain our temporary situation. I've tried. They're not interested in negotiation. They specifically said to inform you that terms are non-negotiable. The phrase struck Preston like a physical blow, the exact words Nick Caldwell had used regarding Alexis's divorce settlement. With sinking certainty, he realized who controlled Monarch Holdings. Simultaneously, Benjamin Westcott received notice that the medical board was expanding its investigation into his conduct, now including testimony from 3 former patients and a nurse who claimed to have witnessed inappropriate behavior. The Westcott family gathered at their Beverly Hills mansion that evening. Preston, his wife Catherine, Benjamin, and their daughter Meredith, who had flown in from New York. The atmosphere was funereal. "How bad is it?" Meredith asked, her Harvard Business School training causing her to assess the situation clinically. "We're looking at bankruptcy if we can't refinance $87 million in 2 weeks," Preston admitted. "Most of our liquid assets are tied up in legal defense or have been used to cover operating shortfalls." Benjamin poured himself a third scotch. "This is all about Alexis. If she hadn't gotten involved with me again." "This started before Alexis," Meredith interrupted sharply. "You and Dad decided to target Caldwell's company because you needed his technology and didn't want to pay market value for it. Alexis was just your entry point." Catherine Westcott's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "We need to approach Caldwell directly. Offer a truce." "He won't speak to any of us," Benjamin replied bitterly. "I've tried. His security won't even let me into the building." Meredith, who had remained largely separate from her family's machinations, studied her father and brother with new clarity. "You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Nick Caldwell isn't like the trust fund rivals you've outmaneuvered before. He's a self-made survivor with nothing to lose." "We're Westcotts," Preston responded automatically. "Our family has stood for something in this community for generations." "And he knows that's your vulnerability," Meredith countered. "You care about legacy and appearance. He only cares about justice as he defines it." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken when Preston's phone rang. The caller ID showed their family attorney. Preston, I've just received a settlement offer from Caldwell's team. It's unusually specific. As the attorney outlined the terms, Preston's face paled. Caldwell was offering to consolidate and refinance all Westcott debt under reasonable terms, drop his assistance to regulatory investigations, and cease all actions against the family, with conditions. First, Preston would resign from all hospital leadership positions, transferring control to Meredith rather than Benjamin. Second, Benjamin would voluntarily surrender his medical license, pending full investigation of all complaints. Third, the Westcotts would issue a public apology to Nick for unfounded accusations and interference with his business. He's dismantling our family piece by piece, Preston whispered after ending the call, making Meredith his ally against us. Meredith shook her head. He's offering salvation through me because I'm the only one who wasn't involved in your scheme. He's separating the guilty from the innocent. We can't accept these terms, Benjamin protested. It would destroy everything. And what's your alternative? Meredith demanded. Financial ruin? Criminal charges? Dad, you plan to dismantle someone's life work because it was convenient for your expansion plans. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Across town, Nick received updates on the Westcott family meeting from Sky, who had developed sources within their household staff. They're divided, she reported. Meredith is arguing for acceptance. The men are resisting. Nick nodded, unsurprised. And Catherine? Practical. She understands their position is untenable. Pouring himself a rare glass of Celebration bourbon, Nick gazed out at the Pacific. His parents had taught him that revenge was a luxury poor men couldn't afford, but justice was a necessity no man should live without. Prepare the final documentation, he instructed. They have until midnight tomorrow to decide. As Nick sipped his bourbon, his phone buzzed with an unexpected name, Alexis. He hesitated before answering. Nick, her voice carried none of its usual confidence. I need to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss. The Westcotts are planning something desperate. Benjamin has been drinking, talking about making you pay personally. I'm concerned. Nick's laugh held no humor. Now you develop a conscience? Or did they just cut you loose when you became a liability? Her silence confirmed his suspicion. Whatever they're planning, Nick said coldly, won't change the outcome. The difference between us, Alexis, is that I anticipated every scenario, including betrayal. They never considered I might fight back. After ending the call, Nick contacted his security team to implement heightened protocols. Benjamin Westcott's deteriorating stability represented an unpredictable variable, the only kind Nick truly respected as dangerous. That night, as the Westcotts argued about their limited options, Nick reviewed his contingency plans one final time. Whatever decision they reached, he was prepared. Unlike his opponents, he had calculated every move not just 3 steps ahead, but all the way to the endgame. Chapter 7. Crossing the Rubicon. When Preston Westcott failed to respond by the midnight deadline, Nick was neither surprised nor disappointed. Men like Preston, who inherited rather than built their empires, typically couldn't comprehend total defeat until experiencing it firsthand. At 12:01 a.m., Nick sent a single text message to Sky. Execute Rubicon. Within hours, the final phase began. Monarch Holdings filed for immediate foreclosure on all Westcott medical properties. Simultaneously, digital evidence of Preston's involvement in Medicare billing fraud, evidence Nick had been withholding, was anonymously delivered to federal prosecutors, removing any chance of the investigation being dismissed as a misunderstanding. By morning, trading of Westcott Healthcare stock was temporarily suspended due to volatility. By afternoon, the board of directors called an emergency session to discuss Preston's removal. Nick monitored these developments from his office, his attention divided between the Westcott's implosion and a potential security threat. Alexis's warning about Benjamin, while self-serving, aligned with risk assessments from his security team. Benjamin had missed his last 2 medical board hearings, withdrawn large amounts of cash, and stopped using his cell phone, behavioral red flags suggesting a man preparing to take drastic action. We've increased patrols and updated your secure transport protocols, his head of security reported. All residences and offices have enhanced monitoring. Nick nodded approval. And the parents? Your father insisted they don't need protection in Ohio, but we've stationed a team nearby as a precaution. The personal threat crystallized that evening when Benjamin Westcott bypassed perimeter security at Nick's Malibu home by approaching from the beach during a patrol changeover, a vulnerability Nick had identified but not yet addressed. Security cameras captured Benjamin climbing the seawall, clearly intoxicated and carrying something in his jacket. The system automatically alerted Nick, who was working late at his downtown office. You need to evacuate the house, his security lead urged through the emergency channel. We're 8 minutes out. No, Nick replied calmly. Maintain distance, but keep visual. I'm handling this personally. Sir, that's against all protocols. He's not here for property damage, Nick interrupted. He wants confrontation. Let's not disappoint him. Nick remotely activated his home security system's lockdown mode, restricting Benjamin's movement to the main floor while dispatching his helicopter for rapid return. 20 minutes later, he landed on his private helipad and entered his home through a concealed entrance, accessing his security center before confronting the intruder. The monitors showed Benjamin in Nick's study, drunkenly rifling through desk drawers while occasionally glancing at his watch, suggesting he was either meeting someone or working against a timeline. Nick armed himself with knowledge rather than weapons. The thermal imaging showed an object in Benjamin's jacket consistent with a handgun, expected but concerning, and his erratic movements suggested extreme emotional distress or intoxication. When Nick entered the study, Benjamin whirled around, momentarily startled before recovering with a bitter laugh. Finally facing me directly, Caldwell. He pulled the gun from his jacket, aiming it unsteadily. No hiding behind lawyers and corporate maneuvers. Nick remained in the doorway, hands visible. Breaking into someone's home with a weapon carries serious consequences, Benjamin. Even for Westcott. Consequences? Benjamin's laugh verged on hysteria. You've already destroyed everything. My career, my family's legacy. All because you couldn't accept that Alexis preferred me. This was never about Alexis, Nick replied evenly. This was about your family's attempt to dismantle what I built. Alexis was merely your accomplice. Benjamin's hand shook slightly. My father had the right approach. People like you, from nowhere, with nothing, need to understand your place. And where exactly is my place in your worldview? Serving families like mine, Benjamin snarled. Providing your skills and innovations for our benefit. Grateful for the opportunity. Not building competing empires. Nick studied the man before him. Privileged, entitled, genuinely bewildered that someone he considered beneath him had not only fought back, but won. That's the fundamental difference between us, Nick observed. You believe your name entitles you to what others build. I believe we earn our place through what we create and defend. Benjamin stepped closer, steadying the gun. Philosophical until the end. Let's see what your creation is worth when you're gone. Do you really think I wouldn't be prepared for this? Nick asked quietly. Every word is being recorded. My security team is surrounding the property. There's no scenario where you leave here having improved your situation. Doubt flickered across Benjamin's face. You're bluffing. The same way you bluffed about Alexis loving you? She contacted me yesterday, warning me about your instability. She's already negotiating her next landing spot, now that the Westcott fortune is evaporating. The revelation struck Benjamin visibly. You're lying. Check your phone. She's been trying to reach you, likely to establish distance before you do something irreversible. When Benjamin instinctively reached for his phone, Nick pressed a concealed button. The study doors slammed shut and locked automatically as gas deployed from hidden vents, a non-lethal sedative Nick had installed after a previous corporate espionage attempt. Benjamin fired wildly, the bullet embedding in the wall as he succumbed to the fast-acting compound. By the time security personnel entered in protective gear, he lay unconscious on the imported carpet, the gun secured several feet away. Transfer him to the safe facility, Nick instructed his team. Full medical monitoring, no communication devices. Sir, this is kidnapping, his security lead warned. We should contact authorities. It's citizen's arrest following armed home invasion, Nick corrected. We'll contact authorities when I've finished managing the situation. As Benjamin was removed, Nick placed 2 calls. The first to Meredith Westcott. Your brother is in my custody following an armed intrusion into my home, he explained without preamble. He's unharmed but sedated. What happens next depends on your father's actions in the next hour. What do you want? Meredith asked, her voice tight with stress but rational. The original settlement terms, plus Preston's immediate resignation from all positions. No public resistance, no further delays. His second call was to Preston directly. You've lost, Preston. Your company is collapsing. Federal charges are imminent. And now your son has committed felony breaking and entering with a deadly weapon. But there's still a path where your daughter salvages something from the wreckage. Preston's voice sounded suddenly old. Where is Benjamin? Safe for now. Make the right decision, and he receives treatment rather than prosecution. Continue fighting, and I release everything. The recordings of your planning sessions, Benjamin's attack tonight, all of it. The silence stretched for several seconds before Preston spoke again. You never intended to compromise, did you? This was always your plan. No, Preston, this was your plan. I merely ensured you experienced its full consequences. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Dawn broke over Los Angeles as news alerts chimed across the city. Westcott Healthcare announces major restructuring. Founder steps down, daughter takes helm. The accompanying press release included Preston Westcott's retirement for health reasons, the appointment of Meredith Westcott as CEO, and a carefully worded apology for recent misunderstandings with business partners. For those in financial circles, the subtext was clear, complete capitulation. Nick watched the coverage from his downtown office, where he'd been working through the night, finalizing details with his legal team. Benjamin Westcott had been quietly transferred to a private rehabilitation facility after signing comprehensive non-disclosure and non-aggression agreements, essentially legal surrender documents, in exchange for Nick declining to press charges for the break-in. The Westcott stock is stabilizing with Meredith's appointment, Sky reported, monitoring financial terminals. Market seems cautiously optimistic about her leadership. Nick nodded, unsurprised. She was always the competent one. Their father chose the wrong successor. The intercom buzzed. Sir, Meredith Westcott is here for your meeting. When Meredith entered, her composure was remarkable given the circumstances. Dressed in a conservative business suit with minimal jewelry, she carried herself with the dignity her father and brother had abandoned. Thank you for seeing me, she began, taking the offered seat. I wanted to personally assure you that the transition is proceeding according to our agreement. Nick studied her carefully. Your brother is receiving treatment? Yes. The doctors believe his breakdown resulted from prescription medication mixed with alcohol, exacerbated by stress. She maintained steady eye contact. I want to be clear. While I'm implementing your terms, I don't condone my family's actions or excuse them, nor am I here seeking mercy. Then why are you here, Ms. Westcott? To understand my opponent, she replied candidly. My father and brother misunderstood you fundamentally. They saw only your success, not the journey that created it. I won't make the same mistake. Nick allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Refreshingly direct. The Westcott name might survive, after all, with you at the helm. That's my intention. But I need to know, is this truly the end? Once our agreement is fully implemented, will you consider the matter resolved? The question hung between them, weighty with implications. Nick had spent months orchestrating the Westcott's downfall, dedicated countless resources to ensuring they experienced complete defeat. Yet looking at Meredith, the innocent party in her family's schemes, he recognized something of himself, someone determined to build rather than merely inherit. My conflict was never with you, he finally answered. Honor the agreement, reform your family's business practices, and our companies need not be enemies. Relief flickered briefly across her composed features. And what of Alexis? She's irrelevant to our arrangement. Meredith nodded, understanding the dismissal in his tone. She's contacted me 3 times since yesterday. Apparently, She's very concerned about Benjamin's well-being now that her other options have evaporated. Nick's expression revealed nothing, but internally, he felt the last emotional tether to his former wife dissolve. Her concern comes remarkably late. As Meredith departed with formal handshakes and carefully worded commitments, Nick turned his attention to the final piece of unfinished business. Alexis had been notably absent from recent events, attempting to distance herself from the Westcott's implosion while undoubtedly seeking new opportunities. His phone showed 7 missed calls from her since Benjamin's apprehension. He had no intention of returning them. Instead, he called his mother. "It's finished, Mom," he said when she answered. "They've accepted all terms." Martha Caldwell's sigh carried both relief and lingering anger. "And you? Are you finished too?" The question penetrated deeper than she likely intended. Nick had achieved his objective. The Westcotts neutralized, his company secure, his betrayers facing consequences proportional to their actions. Yet victory felt hollow without something to build toward. "I've been so focused on responding to their attack that I haven't considered what comes next," he admitted. "Then it's time you did," Martha replied pragmatically. "Revenge sustains you through the fight, Nick, but it can't nourish a life afterward." After ending the call, Nick stood at his office windows overlooking the city he'd conquered through intelligence and determination. For months, his purpose had been singular: ensure the Westcotts and Alexis paid for their betrayal. With that accomplished, an unfamiliar emptiness stretched before him. Sky interrupted his reflection. Final reports are in. All Westcott assets have been transferred according to agreement. Preston's resignation is official, and Benjamin has checked into treatment. The digital surveillance confirms Alexis has vacated her temporary housing and appears to be leaving the state. Where to? New York, according to her ticket purchases and hotel reservation. She's apparently pursuing reconnection with a college friend with banking connections. Nick nodded, unsurprised that Alexis was already seeking her next opportunity. Maintain passive monitoring only. She's no longer a priority. For the first time in months, Nick left the office early, driving the coastal highway with no particular destination. The setting sun cast long shadows across the Pacific, reminding him of evenings before betrayal had consumed his focus. When his phone rang with Alexis's number again, he finally answered. "What do you want, Alexis?" Her voice carried practiced vulnerability. "Nick, please, you've won. Everything's been destroyed. The Westcotts, my reputation, my future here. Isn't that enough? Was it ever about winning for you?" he asked, genuine curiosity tempering his coldness. "Or simply about upgrading to what you perceived as a better option?" "It wasn't that simple," she protested. "Ben and I had history. His family pressured both of us. Things got complicated." "No," Nick interrupted. "They really didn't. You made choices knowing the consequences they would have for me. The complexity is an excuse you've created to justify betrayal." The silence stretched between them before Alexis spoke again, her voice hardening slightly. "So that's it? No possibility of forgiveness? No acknowledgement that people make mistakes? Forgiveness requires repentance, Alexis. You're only sorry about the outcome, not your actions." Nick pulled his car over at a scenic overlook, watching waves crash against the cliffs below. "But I'm grateful. Grateful." Confusion colored her voice. "Your betrayal revealed truths I needed to understand about you, about the world I've built in, about myself. I won't forgive you, but I no longer need to punish you either. Your life is your own now. I suggest you build something real with it." He ended the call before she could respond, silencing her number permanently as he turned his attention back to the horizon. The emptiness he'd felt earlier began to transform into something different. Not quite peace, but possibility. Chapter 9. Rebuilding. 1 year after the Christmas revelation, Nick stood on his parents' front porch watching snow fall in gentle swirls. The modest Ohio home remained unchanged, a constant in a year of transformation. Inside, his mother arranged fresh-baked cookies on a holiday platter while his father tended the fireplace. Neither mentioned the previous Christmas's dramatics. They had collectively decided that particular tradition need not be repeated. The expansion in Singapore exceeded projections, Nick explained as they settled into the living room. And the new cybersecurity division has government contracts through 2027. Richard nodded approvingly. And the Westcott situation? Resolved completely. Meredith has restructured their organization into something respectable. Preston retired to their Arizona property. Benjamin completed treatment and moved to Europe to practice medicine under supervision. And Alexis? Martha asked carefully. Nick shrugged. Working at an investment firm in Manhattan, according to Sky's last report. Dating a hedge fund manager. Apparently happy. What he didn't add was that he no longer required these reports. Monitoring Alexis had become irrelevant to his life, an unnecessary connection to a chapter he'd closed. The conversation shifted to local news and family matters, comfortable in its normality. Later, after his parents had retired for the evening, Nick sat alone by the Christmas tree, reflecting on the year's journey from betrayal to resolution. The ruthlessness that had driven his response to the Westcott's attack remained within him, a capacity for calculated retribution that had surprised even those who knew him best. But it no longer dominated his thinking or planning. His phone buzzed with a message from Sky. Meredith Westcott reached out. Proposed collaboration on the hospital security initiative. Worth considering. A year ago, partnership with anyone named Westcott would have been unthinkable. Now, Nick recognized the strategic value and appreciated the symmetry of rebuilding something positive from conflict's ashes. Set up a meeting for January, he replied. Neutral location. As he set down his phone, Nick noticed a small package under the tree that hadn't been there earlier. The tag read simply, "To remind you what matters. Mom and Dad." Inside lay a framed photograph he'd never seen before. Himself at age 10, standing proudly beside a science fair project that had won first place. His parents flanked him, their expressions radiating unconditional pride and support. Alongside the photo was a handwritten note in his father's angular script. You've proven you can survive any betrayal and defeat any enemy. Now prove you can build a life worthy of survival. Love always, Dad. Nick placed the frame carefully on the mantel, positioning it where the firelight illuminated the faces of his younger self and parents. The bitter satisfaction of revenge had sustained him through months of calculated warfare against those who had tried to destroy him. His enemies had learned a painful lesson about underestimating someone they consider beneath them, but his parents' gift reminded him of a fundamental truth. Destruction, however justified, ultimately created nothing. His true legacy would be built not through the enemies he defeated, but through what he created in victory's aftermath. Standing alone in the quiet Christmas Eve stillness, Nick Caldwell made a silent promise to himself. The ruthlessness that had enabled his survival would remain, a core strength he would never apologize for, but it would serve creation rather than destruction. Those who betrayed him had paid their full measure. Justice had been executed with precise calculation, and now a different kind of strength was required. As snow continued falling outside, covering the landscape in clean possibility, Nick began planning his next creation. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.